roundheads and cavaliers. 10 points to anyone who spots the euphemism as it relates to today's topic. My name's Danny. This is my own worst enemy. World's most beloved mental health podcast. I say beloved because it's not quantifiable. We're certainly not the most popular. Check the charts today. Right, and not the global charts or anything like that, just the mental health charts. Not even in the top 200. Rubbish. I'm starting to wonder if I'm like one of those X Factor contestants who's got like even less self-awareness than they've got talent. Like 4 no's from the judges. Simon Cowell's like, maybe it's time to knock it on the head, Danny, try something else. And I'm like, no, I'm going to make it. Oh, God. Anyway, the topic of today's conversation is the social and psychological effects of pornography. So, the reason this premise even occurred to me in the first place is because, as I mentioned in today's episode, I think I might have mentioned it before on occasion, I run a mental health support group in Manchester. And the amount of times I've had guys confide in me, particularly young single guys, confide in me that their sole reason for attending the group is precisely because they're single, and that as a result of this they feel lonely and depressed and what have you. It's insane. There's loads of them. Honestly, it's like maybe 50% of all male attendees there for no other reason than loneliness. And like I say, this is young guys. But what's even more interesting is there's a certain subset of these guys who are also saying that the reason they're single in the first place is because they either don't know how to meet women or that meeting women is too risky. Like they're worried about offending women or getting accused of being creeps or whatever. And that because of this, their only sexual outlet is watching porn. And, of course, cavorting with Madam Palm and her 5 lovely daughters. So, yeah, I started to wonder whether watching porn wasn't so much a consequence of being single and lonely as it might be the cause of it. Purely speculative, but yeah, that was the genesis of the idea behind today's episode. Now, I've got to admit, I think a little bit of me thought I might have pulled an Isaac Newton when the apple twatted him on the head, and maybe I'd stumbled across an interesting correlation that maybe no one else had spotted. But I've since discovered there's an entire subculture of blogs and forums and YouTube videos out there, all related to this exact topic. The 2 most intriguing things I came across, one was something called NoFap. Okay, so this is a group of guys who were addicted to porn, trying to wean themselves off it by going cold turkey. And there's a whole support system built around it. There's forums, guys egging each other on and swapping tips and advice and all sorts. But what's particularly interesting about this movement, from my perspective, is there seems to be loads of anecdotal evidence that quitting porn and masturbation seems to be having positive effects on these guys' mental health, with loads of them saying stuff like, after 2 weeks, 30 days, whatever, the depression, anxiety, brain fog, fatigue, all just disappears. So that's definitely worth exploring at some point. Another is something called the MGTOW movement, MGTOW, or Men Going Their Own Way. And this is basically a community of guys who feel that there's a political, societal, legal, gender bias against men, which, particularly from a legal perspective, could be a justified accusation, I think. But their whole philosophy is that as a result of this bias, relationships with women fail a risk-benefit analysis, and that the answer to this is to refrain from any and all romantic and or sexual relationships with the opposite sex. Now this one, I'm not convinced of in the slightest. If I'm honest, it sounds a bit like a philosophy based on bitterness and resentment for maybe, I don't know, something maybe gone on in these guys' pasts or whatever. And I can't see how actually sticking to this lifestyle is going to make anyone any happier. Don't know, just my opinion. But yeah, the way I see it, I don't know, you start a business, go make all the money in the world, master a craft, become a genius, ride the self-development train all the way to perfection station. But I don't know, for me, take female attention, female company out of the equation. What's the point? Pointless. It's why I didn't join the army, and it's why I don't plan on going to prison. But I don't know, that's just me. You know, maybe staring in the mirror, patting yourself on the back and having sex with watermelons is the key to happiness. Who knows? Either way, I'm interested in finding out, so I will be exploring both these topics at some point. Anyway, let's proceed. My guest today is Wendy Maltz. Wendy is an internationally recognised certified sex therapist with more than 40 years of clinical experience and a leading expert on healing sexual abuse, women's sexual fantasies, healthy sexuality, and recovery from porn-related concerns. She served as an adjunct, I hate that word, I hate it, an adjunct instructor. God, let me try this again. She served as an adjunct instructor teaching human sexuality in counselling at the University of Oregon. Oh, God! This is doing my head in. I can't even, but I'm not in the mood to edit anything today either, so this is going in. Right. She served as an adjunct instructor. Jesus Christ. Oh. I'm sat here on my own doing this, laughing at myself. I'm losing it. She served as an adjunct instructor teaching human sexuality in counselling at the University of Oregon. And in 2014, she received the prestigious Cairns Award from the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health for her outstanding work in the field of sexual addiction. Get in. Wendy is the author of numerous books, including Private Thoughts, Exploring the Power of Women's Sexual Fantasies, The Sexual Healing Journey, A Guide for Survivors of Sexual Abuse, and the book, which expands on today's topic, The Porn Trap, The Essential Guide to Overcoming Problems Caused by Pornography. You can follow Wendy on Twitter. She's at HealthySexTweet. You can pay her website a visit as well, which is just healthysex.com. Nice and simple, easy one to remember. If you'd like to comment on this episode, not on the introduction, please, just on the episode, you can go to myownworstenemy.org/podcast. That's also where you'll find all the show notes, any relevant information. I think that's about it. I'm running out of steam. We've come to the end of it. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go pay my own SoundCloud page a visit, open a few tabs, press play a couple of 100 times, try and bump myself up the charts a little bit. You're welcome to help me with that endeavour, if you like, you know, rather than just sitting there listening passively. Please feel free to like and share if you enjoy this episode. Don't if you don't. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I promise my conversation with Wendy is of a much higher quality than this introduction. So before I put my foot in it any further, please enjoy my conversation with Wendy Maltz. Right, okay. Wendy Maltz, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Danny.
Right, definitely something a bit out of left field today. We're talking about pornography and the negative effects of pornography, specifically trying to keep it within a kind of mental health context. So, yeah, I tell you what, let's start off with, tell us a little bit about you, because you are you describe yourself as a sexologist. So I'm super intrigued how you get into this field to begin with. So before we jump into today's topic full on, tell us a little bit about you and how you got into this specific field, please.
Okay. Well, back in the 1970s, if you can believe it, I was director of the Berkeley Women's Center, and I did a lot of work with women. And I also had a job later working with adolescents. And one of the things I noticed with both those populations were that when you started to talk about sexuality and people got some help with dealing with sexual problems, that their self-esteem went up. The kids I was working with were pre-delinquent, and when they started doing sexuality, learning about just sex education, a lot of the delinquency behaviors went down. And I started seeing this incredible connection between self-esteem and mental health in general, and how a person felt about their sexuality. So I started studying it. I ended up becoming a sex therapist with the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and specializing in sexuality concerns. I've written like 6 books, and the book we'll be talking about today, The Porn Trap, was my latest book. But I'm also known for having written one of the top resources for people with sexual abuse histories and how to recover healthy sexuality. So, it really impressed me. A lot of the interventions that had been used for people with sexuality problems, a lot of those worked, except with certain people who had been sexually abused. It was really hard to do sex therapy exercises. So I ended up developing techniques and ways that people could overcome those problems to achieve a healthy sex life in spite of what had happened to them in the past. And then pornography problems started coming in. People started talking about porn problems in session as the internet took off and people were able to access so much pornography on the internet and use it more as a sexual partner. And so then that got me into working on and researching with my husband, Larry, for the book we ended up doing, The Porn Trap.
Yeah, what I was interested about in the, I think it's in the first chapter or the introduction to the book, you say that it was only fairly recently that you felt the need to actually tackle the issue of porn. And so I'm just wondering if you could take us through that, why, when did the book come out? Sorry.
Well, the book actually came out in 2008, and
okay.
So it's been a while since it's been out. But it really, things haven't, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that's changed except for the use of pornography's gone up. I think there's more acceptance now of the idea that pornography can cause real serious problems for people. It can get out of control.
Well, the thing is, porn's always been there. And so I'm just wondering, what was it, what were you seeing, what was happening, what was kind of the impetus for you? What changed so that you thought, right, we have to kind of tackle this specific subject now that you'd not felt the need to tackle before?
Well, the product changed is what happened. It sort of became on demand, accessible at any time, in your hand, in the iPhones, as well as, on the internet. People could interact with it in a different way, with pornography in a different way than they ever did in history. Like I said, I started out early in the 1970s. And so you're talking about decades of work helping people with sexuality problems. I didn't hear very many problems around pornography for the first several decades. It was something that came in a brown paper wrapper and people were kind of embarrassed about. But then when the internet took off, the that it's, and also the videos that started coming out in the 80s and 70s, where people could actually put a VHS kind of put a cassette in and watch pornography. The type of porn, the way porn looked was different. I used to watch pornography, and I went to some pornographic movies with my husband when we were really young, and back in Berkeley in the 70s. And we thought it was just kind of like this exciting thing we kind of wanted to know about and all. But what I started, my whole feelings about it really changed as I started hearing from clients saying that they were getting like hooked on it. They were liking it better than real sex. Wow. Not just like to spice things up a little, but it was taking over, and it was becoming like the primary partner for the sexual outlet for them. So it went sort of from entertainment and kind of art, or art and entertainment, to being something that became an actual sexual object, and a preferred sexual object at that. So I think nowadays, I'm sure you would agree, pornography is a major way that people masturbate, and they learn about self-touch, or they start self-touch in relation to pornography, because it's a really powerful stimulant. It just goes right to our central nervous system, and it just turns things on. It turns our bodies on, and it's a very powerful substance, and in the form it is now, and then where people can click and see more different types of pornography in like a minute than anyone ever could see of their whole lifetime before, or not even in a minute, in 10 seconds, you can see more than anyone kind of saw before.
I mean, I've got to say, I don't know which, I've got a few things kind of juggling in my mind here. The first one is, I've got to say that, so I grew up in the 90s, as a teenager in the 90s. And so my first encounters with porn was, someone's dad had a video stashed under his bed or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I've got to say, the thing about porn now seems to be, aside from it being just easily accessible, it seems that the kind of the tone of it has changed as well. Yeah. Now, I don't know if I'm romanticizing this. Maybe I am a little bit. But it seemed to me that when the porn that we watched as kids in the 90s was that you had this woman who was kind of, she was the prize, and she was kind of glamorized. She was this, she was the object of desire. And then it was the guy's job in the film to just pleasure the woman as much as possible, give her as many orgasms as possible. And that was where the entertainment was. And that was kind of the dynamic between the two. Whereas now, it's changed into this kind of, even mainstream porn is very much about humiliation and just treating the woman like shit, and like the guys coming in and dominating her, and just, really kind of extreme. What's normal now, we would have considered back then just to be the most extreme stuff. I mean, the extreme stuff that's out there now, not even
the
extreme
get started.
Stuff
is way,
yeah. So
other planetary. You're bringing up something really important, that the nature of porn itself, what's the content in it, has become more violent. There's more aggression. It is more degrading, and I think. And there's been a lot written about this and studies on it. It's kind of like the edge. It's always needed an edge. It's been the transgressive kind of outlet, the rebellion, and so it kind of always has to maintain some kind of edge to bring in the consumers. And people get habituated to a certain type of porn. They have to add something to it. Maybe they make the females look like they're 12 years old instead of 18, something, and that's, or they include more risky sex, or sex that that where people's bodies get hurt, and humiliation. All this is, I think it's like that spinning out really to sell a product, just like adding more caffeine into coffee drinks or something, or into soda drinks, in order to sell them, because people get they get bored with what they're seeing, and they want that hit again. And it all has to do with how the brain interacts with porn, because your brain does get habituated. You can get kind of numbed to content, and then what a lot of the excitement in porn was from getting a boost from the adrenaline of, ooh, I'm watching something scary, or I shouldn't be seeing this. And that kicks in with the sexual arousal to make a hit. And you kind of go searching for something that will create that hit again. And it's often a little bit farther out than what you had thought you'd ever look at. And it keeps getting a little farther out. And that's why people came into therapy saying, I can't believe the stuff I'm looking at, what I'm into, what's wrong with me. I've kind of turned into a monster in my mind. And you're talking about mental health problems. When people's inner view of themselves and starts getting farther apart from their actions, and there's a split going on and conflict going on between their values and what they want and believe in, and what they're like getting aroused to sexually, that split creates can fuel major depression, major anxiety, fear, shame, all those negative emotions. It's amazing that a lot of people, it takes them a while till they see that connection, and they go, oh, the reason I've become more isolated socially, or the reason I can't sleep, or I'm embarrassed to talk in front of other people, or even to ask someone out on a date, is because, I have this secret world and the secret life and the secret me that I'm thinking has become more and more corrupt. But, people have to have a lot of self-compassion here, because it's the interaction with the product that does it. It's the influence of the product. It's not their intrinsic sexuality. It's just that can happen to anybody who goes down those routes and allows the pornography to really shape your sexual interest.
Yeah, I think, well, we've covered a lot of stuff there broadly, and what I'm going to do is we'll dip in and out of it as we go along. But on that topic of the specificity towards, say, mental health, some people might be listening to this and saying, well, hang on a minute, what's this got to do with mental health? And the reason I wanted to do this is because, so I run a mental health support group, and I talk to people there, and they confide in me a lot of things. And of course, this is only anecdotal. I haven't done any kind of randomized clinical trial or anything. But I've seen, I won't say I've seen a pattern, but I've spoken to quite a lot of guys, especially young guys, who, for them, porn is their only avenue to sex. They don't have any kind of other interaction with women, but they're also, at the same time, they're attending this mental health support group for things like depression and anxiety. And like I was saying, most of the guys that I've spoken to about this are young guys and what you might call millennials. And I don't think I'm quite in that generation. So I'm 35. I mean, the dates vary. And what I find interesting for these guys who say that they don't bother with girls because it's too risky. Getting a girlfriend is a risky business because of the whole so-called rape culture that all these hysterical bleeding out liberals would have you believe that we live in. And yeah, what's interesting is these millennials seem to be this first generation that are growing up where sex is everywhere. media and films and music and everything's about sex. And it's not just kind of perceived sex. It's not just that people like dressing skimpy and bodies are everywhere, but there's also this message, especially within music, of kind of come and get some of this. But paradoxically, it's also the generation that says, well, don't go talking to girls in a bar because that makes you creepy stranger. Everyone's scared of strangers. All the guys are scared that every girl he's trying to talk to might be some rabid third wave feminist, and all the girls are afraid that every guy that comes to talk to him's got a roofie in his pocket. And you know, you can't look at girls anymore, even if she's dressed to impress, because that makes you a pervert. God forbid you compliment a girl, tell her she's pretty, because then you're objectifying her. Whereas I didn't grow up with that kind of feeling that trying to go and talk to a girl in a bar is risky because you might offend the girl, or the girl might accuse you of being a pervert, or, you know, being a rapist or something like that. This seems to be a genuine fear for young guys these days. And so, like I say, they've grown up in this hypersexualized culture where there's just sex everywhere. But at the same time, sex is on show, but it's not available. And so it seems they've said to me that like the only option is porn. Porn's the safe option, you know, and it's like you say, it's easily accessible. But at the same time, these guys are feeling very lonely because of it. And they want a girlfriend, but they can't get a girlfriend. It's very risky. And I'm interested in because you do, you know, you treat people as a therapist. I'm wondering if you've seen anything similar, any similar themes with that of why, on a personal level, particularly young single guys are attracted to porn and are using porn almost exclusively.
Well, I think, you know, what you've brought up in terms of the fear of sexual violence and the rape culture we live in, and there's also sexually transmitted diseases and infections are rampant. And, you know, there are a lot of dangers and risks with bodily fluid contact sex, you know, but I don't know. What I see going on there primarily, I hear that a bit as an excuse, and it might be a way where a young man, you know, is kind of like might be in denial and excusing his behavior, trying to excuse out why it's difficult for him to relate and find a sexual outlet. First of all, the type of sex, what sex means, if you just grow up masturbating to porn, is really different than intimacy-based relationship sex. We're talking about two different things. Yeah, you know, if you're a male, your penis is involved and ejaculation might be involved, but it's like, whoa, it's just the whole context, the whole setup. Porn is a kind of disembodied sex. There's no real person there. It's a fantasy that one's relating to an image, a picture. There aren't any interpersonal skills being exchanged or learned. There's no being able to like tune into how a partner's feeling, or even pace and kind of pace yourself, or like in dancing, how you learn how to step together if you're slow dancing, you know, and not on each other's feet. You don't really learn this kind of synchronizing and connecting and being able to connect your heart, your feelings for another human being, your genuine feelings for a person who you've been getting to know, with what's going on with sexual arousal in your genitals and stuff. And so it's kind of like that's a whole new skill set of relating with in a real relationship. And pornography is really good at helping or inducing arousal and erections, usually, you know, and an orgasm within a short period of time. And so a lot of people get used to it, but it's not transferable. So if somebody says, you can't put them in the same thing. And there are a lot of people in relationships with pornography problems. So I would say people need to learn, just go back and really learn how to have relationships with if you're heterosexual with the opposite sex, or if you're gay with another man.
Yeah, that's kind of, I suppose that's kind of what I was alluding to, really, is, again, this is the first generation for whom porn is easily accessible. So, you know, like say for us, it was digging out your mate's dad's video from under the bed, or finding some magazine hidden in a bush or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, even though porn was kind of sort of accessible as a teenager, we were still forced to have interactions with real people. Whereas this generation, you're, say, 14, well, as soon as you can use the internet, you know, maybe 11, 12 years old, you've immediately got access to porn, loads of it. So are you kind of saying that people are getting access to porn first, and then they're getting maybe a distorted view of real human interaction, or just becoming addicted to porn and then just not bothering with human interaction?
Well, it could be that, but I like to look at it as a loss of a whole set of skills. You know, I mean, if you're like a teenager at a dance or something, there's a whole skill set there of how do you approach someone else and see if they want to dance together. How do you dance together? You know, how do you talk? How do you make small talk? How do you get to know someone? How do you learn to be vulnerable with somebody and share your feelings? How do you create a friendship together with a person, and then move into you know, connecting that with thoughts of maybe wanting to get closer with their body, or touching that you're doing and making out, or things like this. You know, there's a whole set of courtship skills and of body contact skills. You know, a lot of animals go through these incredible mating rituals. You've probably seen birds puff up their chests and all on videos on the internet, things like that. Well, humans, we naturally, for millions of years, have, you know, we have our own set of mating kind of behaviors, and like it has to do with things like touching more like on the shoulder first. You can kind of think of it with slow dancing, like you touch shoulders, and then on the waist, and then, you know, you don't move to below the waist till much later on, moving those together, and a facial caress, things like this. And I think what happens is when people are raised on porn, and they lack this set of skills for being able to connect with a potential partner in a way that reinforces positive relationships and a good sex life in the coming years.
Yeah, that's kind of I think that falls into that category, though, for me, is like you were saying, that old fashioned going out and flirting, and, you know, going in for the kiss, and maybe it's the wrong time, and, you know, that doesn't work out, learning to just be a bit touchy-feely and stuff. It seems to me that's all kind of gone out the window now, and that sort of stuff's not allowed anymore. And
it's allowed, it's just not done much. It's become unnecessary because people have gone for like that, put the focus on the sexual orgasm, you know, and then they've gotten conditioned to pornography as where you get that. And conditioning is really powerful, because you start associating pornography with ultimate pleasure. So where's the motivation to have ultimate pleasure with another human being starts to become more of an obscure construct in your mind. It's not something that's felt or really has been nurtured. You can go back and kind of learn that. But yeah, here, let me tell you what, when I was doing a lot of counseling, one of the reasons why I knew that this sort of process was going on was when people who had come in with very troubled because they had serious porn problems, when they started sharing that they felt better and were feeling healed and able to move on. It was when they started sharing the delight they were getting in connection with another human being. It's the males who, were developing close female friendships or going on group activities with mixed groups, and and realizing that they were liked for who they were, and then they started just growing their sexuality in this new way that didn't have to do with porn, but had to do with genuine feeling and full body experience and all the senses being engaged. And that kind of, was self-reinforcing to wanting to leave porn. But to say to somebody who's really been into porn a lot, and that's their only learned sexual outlet, give up porn, it's bad for you. That's kind of like, no, it's like, what are you kidding? That's my sex life. So it's a loss of skills that we're looking at. I think that's a good way of looking at it, and it's a non-shaming way of looking at it. This generation, the millennials you talk about, they didn't come here on the planet and say, hey, I want to be part of a generation where we learn to interact sexually, we're taught to interact sexually with electronic devices instead of flesh and blood human beings, and where we don't really need or have, real genuine heart connection with other human beings related to sex. No, they just happen to be born in this era where you've got pornography, and you've got pornography everywhere. And it's a product like sugar. I mean, you could think of sugar as similar, and there's all these studies. It's got an addictive component. It's bad for your teeth. It's, it increases cancer. It increases all these problems, but it's everywhere, and it's very pleasurable. And people, are now just starting to see that, maybe it'd be good to reduce the amount of sugar or not give little kids a lot of sugar so they get used to it at an early age. That's going to happen with pornography, but we're not there yet. And so this is it's been called the Guinea Pig Generation, the millennials, because they've been thrown into a world, their sexuality has been sort of hijacked by pornography. That's one way of looking at it. I don't know, maybe somebody would say, oh, that's like, the person doesn't have choice and everybody always has choice. Well, yeah, but, about as much choice as you have in terms of whether you want to put sugar in your food or not. By the time you're old enough to figure out what's going on with you, you've actually been compromised by it, or you could have been. Not everybody interacts with pornography and develops problems with it, though. And it's really, or serious problems with it. Most people don't. So,
well, that'd be an interesting distinction to make. What do you think separates somebody who does become addicted to pornography from somebody who doesn't, and maybe somebody who can just kind of use it occasionally and it's not a big deal? What separates those people from someone who ends up taking over their life?
Well, here again, it's hard to say. In the past, I would have said if the person has their fantasy, can fantasize and self-pleasure without pornography, and that's kind of their base beat. And then on occasion, they use pornography to spice things up, and they've got a sense of the porn they absolutely don't want to go to, that person's a lot less likely to develop problems. But there could be a thing, just like with sugar, some people develop diabetes and some people don't, or become hypoglycemic, or like with alcohol, you can give the same amount of alcohol to people. Some, due to the way their bodies interact with it, they develop serious problems. There may be some vulnerabilities. Like I know I'm a pretty obsessive. I can get obsessive. I come off as a relaxed person, but you don't write 6 books and not go to obsession, you know. And those traits have been associated with the people who develop porn problems. I know if I watched porn on a regular basis, a lot of it, and, you know, wasn't in a relationship and stuff, that I would be at high risk to develop a serious problem with it. And because the way my brain works, I'm fascinated by things and I like differences, and, you know, sexual energy is like really neat, and, you know, and so there can be, you know, I think people can come to porn with vulnerabilities. But with this millennial generation, you're talking about kids seeing it when they're 7 or 8 years old, you know, for the first time, and having sexual feelings. They didn't, you know, have their first sexual feelings to something non-pornographic. And so they, you know, like, I did a book on women's sexual fantasies, and I asked women when they had their first kind of, it's a great book. It's called Private Thoughts. And some of those early experiences of when they had their first sexual awakening were things like, oh, I jumped into a swimming pool with my legs spread and I had this neat feeling in my genitals, and that was my sexual awakening. Or, oh, I slid down a banister, or I was sitting up in a cherry blossom tree and the wind blew and I felt this feeling come over my body of sexual energy. Well, I mean, that's what how humans became awakened sexually, or they became awakened sexually holding the hands of another young person when they were little and growing up, you know, and as teenagers when the hormones kicked in. All those are kind of intrinsic, natural sexual awakenings. Pornography imposes itself as the object of sexual awakening, and that creates a really strong first connection.
Yeah, do you think there's something to be said for the idea that those early experiences that you have will shape your sexuality moving forward? So, I mean, if you're, like you say, if you're, say, 12, 13 years old, you first encounter pornography, and you're already watching stuff that's kind of, you know, quite extreme and out there and not really the kind of stuff that goes on in real life, is that going to shape your sexuality as you mature?
It could very well. I remember working with a young man who, he was very upset because he stumbled upon some child pornography when he was young, and as an adolescent, and became aroused to that and climaxed to it. And then he thought he was a sexual pervert or whatever in his own words, and that he was he had wanted to be a teacher and work with children, and he was terrified to be around children. He only did this like once, I think, or twice for the child pornography, but his conclusion was, I must be a sexual offender. I need to create a life where I stay away from children, and it affected the whole way he saw himself. And a lot of the work in therapy was to you know, see that, you know, he didn't go on to make that, to do that as the focus of his pornography and his sexual outlet. But the fact that it affected his body the way it did, and he responded when he was young and experimenting, that didn't, you know, that was related to the product. And so, I mean, it can, but you can see if he had stayed with it and continued into child pornographic stuff, that could just, you know, that could define his life, his sexuality, if he reinforced it over and over again. What he did was he shut down, and he shut down from people, and and then, when he got old enough to figure out, that something was seriously wrong, then he, came into therapy for help. And he eventually was able to very slowly, move into being able to be around kids, relatives at first, and then some short-term summer camp, kind of a week here or a week there. And then he built confidence and he got back into going, yeah, I really like young people and I want to help educate young people and work with them. And he felt confident around his sexuality and his sexual interests as he got older too. But whoa, that was what a disrailing, you could say, that pornography did to his life starting at an early age. It disrailed him from growing up, without the burden of all that fear, shame, and anxiety.
Yeah, I've got to say, see, I don't watch porn anymore. I think I stopped watching probably in like my mid-20s. And one of the reasons for that were I noticed that there does come that habituation of you start off just watching plain old vanilla porn and then you see that one video there that looks that little bit more extreme, and so you try that one out, and then I could see the seeds of that in myself. And I've got to say that if somebody's got to the point where they're watching and masturbating and orgasming to really extreme porn that's violent and, where people are cutting each other, people are beating each other, all this weird, mad stuff, is there any way back from that? I mean, can a person get to that point where they're aroused by that level of sexual extremes? Can they really ever go back to just plain old, vanilla sex with a real person? I mean, what's your experience with that clinically?
Yes, but it takes a lot of focus and work, and therapeutic work. And sometimes, people can hit on their own. They hit bottom, and we talk about this in the book, where they just go, I cannot do this anymore. It is so on me to be into this stuff. It turns from being exciting to being absolutely disgusting and deplorable. And, people do this with other things, appetitive interests. Like you can reach that with sugar, where even though you're really into sugar for a lot of your life and want a high sugar products, you can stop taking sugar in. And all of a sudden, if you do a little bit of it, it can be like sicky sweet. You hear people say, ew, this drink is sicky sweet. How come they put too much sugar in it? Whereas before you were guzzling the drink and going, give me another one. And I think it's both a psychological thing, a mental way that you're thinking of the way you're thinking of what you're doing and what kind of product it is. And maybe there's maturity involved to get to a point where you can say, oh my God, this product really has my life by the balls or whatever, literally. And I don't want that. I want self-determination. I want to be my own person in terms of my sexuality. I want to be my own person in terms of my sexual thoughts and behavior. I want to experience what it's like to really love someone and have my body light up like 1,000 Christmas trees, It's like, when you get to that point everything can change. The whole gestalt can change. And so it's easier to stay away from it. Might not be absolute where you just, you can get to that point with cigarettes and say, I'm done with this, and still crave another one down the road when you're under stress. It's just any addiction or anything you've become conditioned to can be like that. But if you start moving in new new experiences that start feeling so much better, healthy sexuality and love-inspired lovemaking is very self-reinforcing. And sometimes once you've had that, it's just like you can't go back to, doing, relating to this product and feeling soul that has no soul. It just feels, it's like, no, I even if my body responds a little to it, I just like I can't do that. And so it's a lot of growth, but there's always a being aware of it and being, making decisions. And no, I don't think I'm going to go to that movie that's all about sex addiction and show somebody, people having this kind of like addictive style sex or, no, I'm not, I'm going to put some controls on my computer, or no, I'm not going to, it's just this comes down to choices, and then what you reinforce that new experience and you condition new associations, you can do it, but, and a lot of people don't want to get to that point. It's an awful point to get to where you go, gee, something else controlled me. Especially, I don't like it as a female, but isn't it that what being a man is all about? To be the master of your own domain, in control of your own life. And it's that a lot of times in working with men, it's that piece where they go, God, the porn industry, where they get some anger around it too. It's like, fuck Pornhub, oh,
Yeah.
excuse, whoops.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
It's like, but that's the sentiment they have. That's in quotes, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going there. Those people made it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they did it off the skin of little boys. How, if that isn't sexual abuse, I don't know what is. Really.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, for me, one of the things that kind of made it an easy deterrent was just kind of, maybe I'm probably just getting old of this, but just the idea of sitting in front of your laptop playing with yourself, it just started to seem a bit pathetic to me. But like I say, that's all well and good for me to say that, because I've never had a problem with meeting girls and interacting with girls. And like I say, I'm of a generation where it was all, we didn't have Tinder and Plenty of Fish and dating websites. That's not how we met people. We met people through people, and it was okay to ask for a girl's number and maybe try and go in for a kiss and things like that. Those were all okay. And so the people that I'm kind of most concerned about in this sense is, like I say, this new generation of guys who, if they get rid of porn, like you were saying before, and I totally agree, replacing porn with real intimacy. There's no comparison. But when I was reading some of the forums and stuff of guys that are addicted to this, they're saying that, yeah, real sex, it's just not the same. It's not as good as porn. Like, they prefer porn. They can't get turned on for a real woman, and there's more action, there's more variety in porn, and the real sex just doesn't do it for them. And if you're in that place, but you're also a single guy, where it's not like, if I was addicted to porn, I've got a partner that I can turn to kind of help me through it, and we could practice the intimacy thing and leave porn alone.
Yeah.
But those guys that haven't got that, and especially these young single guys, they don't know how, they've never learned them social skills. They don't know how to meet girls. What are they to do? Because like they say, porn's the only thing I've got. It's my only sexual outlet. And, is cold turkey, going cold turkey, is that really an option for them? What are those guys to do?
Well, I think you can, like I said, it's a two-step thing. It's a foot off, one accelerator. It's a foot on the brake, but then you need to accelerate in a new direction. And you can't go just, I'm only going to break. You've got to move it forward in some way. What a lot of men have reported has helped, and women have reported has helped, is to stop the porn, but do it when you're already having some sort of support system, a therapist, a support group, or some of these online forums can help some. I think they can help because you hear other people doing that. But then it's the next step is to move forward with doing things like start having a new type of relationship with your genital area. Put I'll describe it's a very simple exercise called a genital hug. You can have your clothes on, just rest your hand over your penis if you're a male, or over your vulva area if you're a female, and just let it rest there, not even move, and feel loving feelings. Or feel appreciation for this part of your body and some of the nice sensations that can happen with it, or the functions that it does with urination, with whatever. Just for females, we have a few more functions there with being able to make babies and all. But the penis can help with making babies if that's where a person's at. But just all the neat things it can do. Start developing new associations and breathe. Create a breath, imagining breathing in and out of your genital area, that it can breathe, and bring in some colors or light, colors that are nurturing and positive, and start associating that with your genital area. And then you can start moving in with some images, of images that are calming and nurturing to you, and start associating that. And you start slow and small and steps like that. And you can imagine that there can be other exercises down the road that would involve, actual stimulation and all. But it's like a reawakening of your sexuality with new associations that don't have to do with porn. And if porn thoughts come in, you just recognize that's going to be part of the process of healing, and as much as possible, sweep them to the side. And you look at what the kind of progress you make over a long period of time, not in an immediate moment, like, oh, I tried that once, but it didn't work. It's like you think how long it took to condition in the pornographic images with arousal. It's going to take a long time to condition something else in. But there's another piece here we haven't talked about, Danny, which I think is important, and it has to do with the maybe we mentioned it a little bit, that relationship skill set, and the pornography isn't just a neutral when it comes to your feelings about male and females and how they relate and who they are sexually. No, it brings in some pretty strong messages about what it means to be a man, or that men have penises of this size. I think in the book, there's something like the average size of erect penis in pornography is 8 inches. The average size in real life is more like 5.5 or something, and it's like, or that, you got to go all night. It's, and that this is the way you talk to a partner, or you slap her around, or, and that's a turn on for her. Well, they don't go, hey, this is a made up, this is made up sex. And a lot of those porn stars, the females, you can read biographies from them, autobiographies or memoirs and things, and they talk about how they threw up afterwards, after some of these scenes they were in, or how they got, a lifelong sexually transmitted disease because the industry doesn't require condoms and frequent testing, or how they their bodies got injured permanently. It made them infertile. I mean, you don't see this stuff, or how humiliating stuff was to both the males and the females, or the ex-male porn stars who say, I can't believe that that's how I saw myself and, what I portrayed. So it's like, there's a lot there with how to relate to somebody during lovemaking, or during, even if it's not lovemaking, if it's just shared sexual fun, there are ways of relating that, and that inspire, build your own self-esteem and that of the partner, and how to learn those.
Yeah, just during the course of this conversation, it's kind of, it's become apparent to me that this is a much broader topic than I kind of initially assumed. I thought we was going to kind of sit down here for an hour, present the problem, and then have it all kind of wrapped up. But yeah, there's more to it than just, I don't know. I think the general idea about porn addiction is you've got this lonely guy sitting in front of his laptop of an evening, just sort of fapping away and turning his taters or whatever, and maybe just doing it that little bit too often, like it's become a nightly ritual and he can't sleep without it. But then you're not thinking about the further ramifications of it, like with teenagers, especially, maybe not cultivating these relationship skills and interpersonal skills, and the fact that you've got this new generation where, the way they meet each other is through Tinder, where you've got to put up pictures where you look drop dead gorgeous, because if you don't, you've got no chance, and if you're not good looking and you haven't learned how to flirt and seduce somebody, what the hell else are you supposed to do except turn to porn to get your kicks? And I think, yeah, even if you are good looking and you can get a woman, if your idea of what a woman is supposed to be and do in the bedroom has been distorted by porn, then, you're going to be disappointed when your Tinder date doesn't, I don't know, dress up as a leather unicorn with a dildo for a horn and let you sit on a forehead for the first date. You're not going to call her back, and no woman's ever going to be good enough for you. And now girls are thinking that the only way they can get a bloke is if they're willing to dress up as livestock and, I don't know, let guys take pictures of them while they do handstands with their head in the toilet. And it's, God, yeah, there's a lot to this. So I think to be continued. I'm going to, I think this has been it's been a,
yeah, welcome to my world here.
God, yeah. It's been a good one to kind of dip my toe in the water and see whether it's, like I say, I was curious whether this was something that kind of belonged in the mental health realm, which is what I cover. But I do think the consequences of it, especially, definitely worth talking about. Anyway, Wendy, before I let you go, I'm gonna subject you to my quick fire questions before, like I do to everybody else. So.
And I do want to say one thing, which is, I don't know if these are one of your questions, but for anybody who's listening now, and if you feel you have a porn problem, I mean, a good place to start is to learn about things like porn addiction and the effects of pornography, and education. You don't have to change anything, but just to invite more education in. And the book Larry and I did, The Porn Trap, The Essential Guide to Overcoming Problems Caused by Pornography, it's not just a plug for the book. There are some other good books. Your Brain on Porn by Gary Wilson. But there, it's like, that's another good book. But, learn about it and learn about what it takes to recover, and know that you're not alone, and that change is possible, and that you can come through this a better, stronger person with and who feels more whole, and who feels whole and in charge of your own life, that is possible to do. I really believe that love and learning are stronger than problems like porn or sexual abuse in whatever form.
Well, you preempted my question there, Wendy. My opening, brilliant. My opening question is: Do you have any book recommendations on this topic? So I put a link to yours in the show notes. And what is it? Gary Wilson? Did you say Your Brain on Porn?
Gary Wilson's book, Your Brain on Porn. I know Gary. He actually lives in Oregon. He and Marnia, his wife, live in Oregon, down at the Ashland, Oregon. And we see each other on occasion. And the Porn Trap has a huge resource listing of books there. And on my website, healthysex.com, I've got free articles. I have free posters. I've got this really cool free poster called The Hazards of Porn. I've heard about people printing. You can print this off, and it just reminds you of the whole variety of different kind of problems that can come from porn. There's another free poster on healthy sex versus porn-related sex, and lots of other interviews and things that I've done. I've got free videos on my website of exercises called Relearning Touch exercises that were developed for people with who were sexually abused. But if you just skip to the part like in the video, Relearning Touch techniques, you can learn about some of the type of exercises that are described in the Porn Trap to help learn these new skills for connecting your heart and who you really are as a person with what's going on with your genitals, and really being able to relate with another person. And so, those are good. But yeah, there's a lot of materials out there.
Well, like I say, I'll make sure I include links in the show notes. So anybody wants to download any of these things or go to Wendy's website, it'll all be there. myownworstenemy.org/podcast. That's where you'll find them. Okay, here we go. So if you could take the reins of power at the Department of Health, what policy would you implement to improve the mental well-being of the general public? But it being you, I'll allow you to change that to the sexual well-being of the general public.
Wow. I think that I don't believe in censorship, and I think my website, healthysex.com, I don't want to see really, good sexuality education things taken off, but I think there does need to be some type of moving pornography. There was once an idea that all porn sites and porn access should have a .xxx
domain name.
What is it? Domain name, and that then you'd know, and that it could be easily be eliminated from access. It's a combination of some, absolute protections for children, especially, but that's not enough in and of itself, because you can always get porn in some way, and people can find ways around these things. But I think there's got to be a public service campaign. And I really think that men like yourself, Danny, and other men and women need to speak out more and say, that this is a problem, and that is a form of, for some people, a form of hijacking of sexuality or abuse, whatever terms feel most appropriate for that people speaking out. But there needs to be things like, we all kind of know that cigarette smoking is bad for your health, right? You might choose to do it, but at least it's not, minors can't get it easily. And there's that feeling that even young kids know that if they take this, it might harm them. So there's that. There also needs to be help for young people starting at early ages, porn literacy or media literacy, work going on, that not everything you see is good for you to see, you know, and the whole concepts of what reinforcement is and conditioning processes. So we're doing it with foods. We're doing it with sugar. You know, there's like, this product has less sugar, and we have, like, you can see the content amounts on it, on a package. But we need this kind of education going on, public service, public health education going on about the serious problems that are being caused by porn. But it's going to be men coming out and saying, this doesn't make you a man. This makes you part of an electronic device.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, like you were saying before about this idea of a guinea pig generation, with things like smoking and sugar or whatever, like, you know, it took a load of people getting lung cancer or a load of people getting obesity and diabetes. I think it's maybe going to be one of those where it's not until we've created a generation of, I don't know, sexual deviants and lonely, depressed porn addicts, it's not until then that we're actually going to realise that there's a problem and do something about it. And
yeah, there was just a recent study I just saw that said that it was of young people, and it said that the rates of intercourse are going down. The reported rates of intercourse are going down, but the rates of sexually transmitted infections have been going up.
Do we know what? I'm confused.
Okay, the amount of it was saying teenagers are having less intercourse. Okay, but their rates of sexual infections when they have, for those who do, has been going up. So that, and they were going, what's going on? Well, the study didn't actually ask people how much they're masturbating to pornography, right? And it's not until studies start asking that question we're going to get good answers scientifically. But one of the therapists, researcher who was interviewed about that study, said it seemed obvious to her that this was a factor of how pornography is changing sex in young people.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
I might try and dig that study out and include that in the show notes. Right. Okay. Moving on. What, if anything, keeps you up at night?
You know, there's so many things to feel like. The political scene in America is probably the one going on right now. But I like being kept up at night in terms of in my marriage. My husband, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a perfectly fine answer if you want to go with that one.
But, you know, I think the thing is that we can't freak out. Every generation, like you said, has its, you know, stuff. I think staying calm, being smart, looking at the positives of what's going on. I think this pornographic generation, there are some positives. People are, in a lot of ways, more frank and open about discussing sexual matters. Even the interview we just did 10 years ago, I wouldn't have, even though I was doing interviews 10 years ago, I wouldn't have felt as loose as, you know, as I did, or maybe you too, you know, with talking about things like masturbation, you know, or erections and stuff. It was just like, there was like, whoa, you talk around those things. You don't talk directly about them. And I know there are a lot of people who are embracing their sexuality in positive ways. And because we do live in a world filled with a lot of good information about healthy sexuality, and yay for that, you know. So I think trying to stay focused on the positives. And I don't really stay up at night worrying. I you know,
stay up at night having sex by the sounds of things.
Yeah. Yeah, as much as possible still. So.
Okay, what's the best piece of life advice anyone's ever given you?
learn to love yourself, probably, and in relation to what we're talking about.
What mistakes do you continue to make despite knowing better?
What mistakes? God, I have so many mistakes. Oh boy. I think the mistake of thinking that I can change other people.
Okay, interesting. Especially as a therapist.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm retired now from counseling, but I do, these kind of interviews, and I stay active in the field in other ways. But it's that idea that I think what I've learned is I can educate people, but change and is up to them. People need to be really motivated on their own for change to occur. And so I feel like I would be remiss. I'm somebody who I have a lot of empathy for people. So when people are hurting because there's a product out there that's screwing with them, I get angry, I get upset, I want to help. But I think the thing is to keep realizing that it's just like, you can only go so far with that everybody changes in their own time, and that the world is constantly changing in positive ways and negative ways, and that's much bigger than any one of us humans, or any group, even small groups, that maybe the truth comes out eventually, and remembering that it may take time, but the things that are harming people, we can learn as a species and will learn to change.
Okay, final three. What part of your career are you most proud of?
Probably the leap I took when I was a young therapist to actually research and write books on healing the sexual problems caused by sexual abuse. I think that that relates to a concept of believing that healthy sexuality is a right that everyone has. It's something everyone deserves and to experience it. I think sex is one of the most beautiful things, amazing, orgasmic, ecstatic, delightful, energizing, exciting, capabilities we have as a human being. And I believe everybody has a right to experience that in ways that are enlivening and life affirming and responsible and fun. And so I believe we need to overcome the shame and embarrassment around sex, and the silences and the isolation, and really move towards that being an actualized right for everyone.
Yeah, and so you facilitated that for a lot of people.
Yes, and I am very proud of that. And I love it when I hear and I get emails from people telling me how, helpful my work has been. That always is a big delight. You take a risk. I've also gotten my share of criticisms and people misunderstanding where I'm coming from or what I'm doing, and sometimes good criticisms that I've learned from. But in general, I don't know what makes us each individual. I don't know why. I don't know why I sort of came out of my shell to put myself out there to do this. I don't like unfairness. I never did as a kid. I was always a kid who just hated unfairness.
Outside of family and career, what investment of time or money has brought you the most joy or fulfillment?
Outside of career, I think my husband and I would both say our canoe.
Okay.
We have this great lightweight canoe, and we were just talking about this was the best thing. We were up in Clear Lake, Oregon, on this beautiful lake, clear blue sky, surrounded by snow-capped mountains and trees and little, ducks and all with their babies and water you can see down to a turquoise bottom. And it was just like, holy cow, we went, this canoe is one of the best investments we ever made.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I love that answer.
Yeah, I'm also, a mom. I have grown children who are with partners, and I'm very happy about that, and I'm pleased about that. And I have grandchildren, and very happy about that. And that, I think family and connections where you really have people in your life who are really close and know you well and really love you for who you are, regardless of the work you do, is really important.
Okay, the final one, the big one.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the key to happiness?
The key to happiness? Is there a key to happiness? Probably it's realizing you have choice in every moment.
No, yeah, I like that one, and we've never had that one before. So
yeah, like when I'm in that canoe, I have a choice to really be there and breathe in the air and appreciate everything going on and the connection with my partner. And those are choices that I make, or I can be zoned out somewhere else and not really experiencing. That's my choice.
Wendy Maltz, thank you very much. Is there any links you'd like to send the listeners to? Are you on social media? This is your opportunity to plug away like crazy.
Well, I have a professional Facebook page too, Wendy Maltz, LCSW. You can get to it from healthysex.com, but I have a Twitter, Healthy Sex Tweet, but it's probably the web page that is a good way to connect. And there's a contact page on there too. And I just wish everybody well. And life is good.
Wendy Maltz, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, if you enjoyed this episode and you've got a couple of minutes to spare, then maybe you'd consider leaving us a positive review on iTunes or Stitcher or whichever podcast service you happen to use. That'd be greatly appreciated. It also encourages other people to give us a listen. If you can't spare a couple of minutes, but you've got a couple of seconds, maybe you could share one of our episodes with your family or friends on social media. Don't forget you can comment on any of these episodes by going to myownworstenemy.org/podcast. And if you'd like to contact me, you can email me at danny@myownworstenemy.org. Or if email's a bit old-fashioned for you, then you can get hold of me on all the different social media channels at Danny D. Whitaker. And that's about that. I'll see you again next time.